Hi everybody, you're in the kitchen with Vita and the family eats, and on this beautiful sunny crisp aired fall day I'm going to present to you my homemade beef stew. This is the weather for it, and I'm going to give you a step-by-step process for your slow cooker. For my recipe, the quantity that I make, I use a very large 5-quart slow cooker. I don't like to do it on the stove. I always like to go in the slow cooker because the flavors marry slower and you get much more depth of flavor in your beef stew. Just my preference. You can do it either way. Your timing will have to be adjusted is all. And as always, throughout the entire video, you'll see the email address scrolling for the family eats, so you can get the full recipe, measurements, grocery list, and all. Okay, so what we're going to do is make sure that we get all of our items together before you start doing anything. It's just the smarter way to do this. You're done all in one shot then. You want to have all your beef ready. You want to have your fry pan ready with how you're going to fry your meat. I use myself leftover bacon drippings I keep in the refrigerator, and that's how I like to fry my beef. And I don't go until it's completely cooked. It needs time to cook in here as well, but I like to sear it in the pan and get that bacon fat rendering into the beef. It makes for a really delicious taste. You're going to need, for this size, 5 or 6 good sized potatoes. And what I've done here is I've just peeled off some of the eyes or blemishes is all. I like the skin. That's nothing to have to waste. So I just peel off any eyes or blemishes. I've got 3 small onions. I've got 6 carrots. Just peel them and have them ready to chop. Everything's going to be a rough chop and dump. I've got some celery with celery leaves and some fresh flat leaf parsley. I add some during the cooking process and then definitely some at the end. You're also going to need a little balsamic vinegar, and you're going to need your favorite sweet heat or mesquite barbecue sauce for a little thickening agent and for another depth of flavor. I also use a half a can of diced tomatoes. I won't use this whole can. I'll only use half, and I'll freeze the rest to go into sauce. And then as far as your spices, what I have here is I have celery seed and ground coriander, salt and pepper, Old Bay, paprika, garlic powder, onion powder, and of course oregano, as I usually will cook with that in almost every stew or casserole. So you can change that up a little bit if you like other spices that you want in there. You're more than happy to go ahead and do whatever you want to do as far as your spices, but those are my basics, go-tos, and that's what will be in the recipe as well. So I take my crock, comes out of my crock pot. So as I said, once my meat is half done, I will dump it into here, and then everything will be a chop and dump, and I will show you how we do that. And then this will go into the slow cooker container. It's plugged in, not ready to heat yet. You always want to add cold items to a cold crock pot. You never want to heat your crock pot and put cold items in it. It's going to take everything twice as long, and a lot of your vegetables are going to be rubbery and tough. So one or the other. Either everything's got to be warm and your crock warm, or do cold to cold. I recommend cold to cold, just easier. Okay, so for the next and first step is browning your meat slightly. I will show you what I like to do when I bring my chuck roast home or my London broil. And yeah, I've used both. I've even used a couple chuck steaks. And what I do when I bring them home is I will take it and cube it in large cubes and put them in Ziploc bags, section it off. I don't like to take my whole chuck roast or London broil and place it into my beef stew. A lot of people do. I don't. I prefer it to be cut up with kitchen shears, and they're these small bite-sized pieces, so they're very tender. And everybody seems to prefer it that way at my house anyway, when I serve it. It's very tender. It gets to reduce down with the balsamic vinegar, and I use a little bit, like a quarter cup of red wine. That's optional. I appreciate the flavor, and so does my family. You don't have to use that. You can omit it, but I think you'll like the flavor that it renders in with the beef. So it's strictly salt and pepper and some Old Bay on the beef, and then once it's gotten good and brown, I'll throw in the little bit of red wine to get up all those bits and flavor bites off the bottom of the pan, and I'll hit it with just about a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. That keeps all beef very tender and very flavorful. I also will put 2 tablespoons in the crock once everything is in there. Okay, so we're going to get started here. The first step is going to be getting the beef set up, the beef station at the fry pan. You're going to want to get at least a 9-inch fry pan. And like I said, I use bacon fat drippings. You don't have to. You can use olive oil if you prefer. But I'm going to get my pan heated, and when we come back, you'll see how this process with the meat starts, and then we'll come back to the vegetables. Okay, we're ready to get started. Okay, so this is my little cup that I keep in the fridge of my bacon drippings for frying and extra flavor. And you want to hear that little sizzle. What I've done so far is I've cut up most of the meat, because I'll have to do it in batches. The more cold meat you put in a pan, the cooler you're going to cool down the pan. So I've put salt and pepper and a little bit of Old Bay on all my tiny little pieces, and I've dusted it with cornstarch. Okay, I'm just going to drop them in there, listen for that sizzle. Let them brown up a bit before we add our nice red wine. And usually what I'll do is if we are entertaining or we're having red wine with dinner, whatever, I'll make sure that I reserve at least, well, unless company's here, or I've had a really bad day, I'll try to reserve at least a cup in the bottle and keep it in my pantry and cook with it here and there. I love it in my red sauce, and I love it in my chili, and I love it in my beef stew. So, the amount of cubes that I had cut up is about all you want to have in your pan. You don't want to keep cooling down your pan, and you want it to have room to brown. You don't want it to steam. Okay? So we're going to let this go, and in the meantime, you see these size pieces. In the meantime, I will cut up the next hunks of beef. And you don't need to be on camera for all that. I won't bore you with all that. When you come back, I'll show you the completed beef. And we will start chopping all of our vegetables. See you in a minute. Okay, everybody. The meat is all primed and done. And just about 3/4 of the way there. And it's very tender. And I poured in the 1/2 cup of red wine, and I deglazed the pan so we don't waste any of those drippings, any of those flavors. They all go in. I put in 2 tablespoons of balsamic vinegar as well, and I'll add a little bit more once we get everything in there. So I've gotten some of the vegetables chopped up so you aren't having to watch me chop numerous of the same. So let's get to, I left a few here so you can see what we're putting in here. Okay? So now when you're doing your carrots, you want the carrots and the potatoes and the onions to all be approximately the same size. So they cook more evenly. Obviously the carrots are going to take the longest, then the potatoes, then the onions, and then the celery. So what I would do is I just go through, chop them up about 1/2 inch in diameter. And then when you get to the heavier stumps here, just take them sideways here and cut them on a 1/2 moon. So then you're keeping them all approximately the same size, okay? So then you just dump those in. Get all your carrots in there. Now what I keep close by is my waste bat bowl. I just keep it right here on the counter, and I know I'm not the first to invent this, and someone else has done this for years on camera. It is very handy, and it is better than having a messy area to work in or to constantly run back and forth to the garbage pail. So when you're working with the meat, you're going to want to give your hands a really good wash before and even a better wash after. Okay? And when you're onto the vegetables, a little bit different. You're not cross-contaminating anything. So I took my onion, cut it in half, cut it in quarters, and then in thirds, just so you have small chunk size, so they don't disintegrate in your stew, and you still have a good bite to them. Okay, so there's the onion. Lastly is the potato. And these are about, medium-sized Idahos. I take them, cut them in half lengthwise, cut them in quarters, and then one more time. So like I say, they're all about the same size cube, okay? You don't want anything, a bunch of real big pieces and then a bunch of small pieces. It's just not going to cook evenly. Somebody's going to get a potato that is hard, and then somebody else is going to get mush. So nobody wants that. So, again, lengthwise. And we're all about the same. Okay. Last one. And you don't have to keep the skins on your potatoes if you prefer not to. I just do because it's added extra fiber, and I try not to waste any of my fruits or vegetables whenever possible. Okay, so now you've got everything in here, and you're going to want to give it a really good stir so everything cooks evenly. But you're going to want to try to push those carrots down here into the very bottom so they get a little bit heavier, longer cooking time than these tender pieces of beef. I took half of the large flat leaf parsley that I had, stems and all. Stems are just as helpful, just as flavorful, taste just like parsley as the leaves do. So I've already put some in, and here's the rest. I will put more in when I serve it as well. So now you're going to take all your spices that we talked about. I have Old Bay. I have ground coriander. That all goes inside. The onion powder and garlic powder all gets dumped. Your S&P, salt and pepper. Your vegetables need it just as much as the meat. I've got oregano here. It's already been woken up. I know you know that's what I say and do all the time. And a little celery seed as well, even though we put a little bit of celery in there. So you're thinking, when you're putting all your spices together, rather than have all your jars out, get a bunch of little cups, or take a few cups and just add them all together, stir them all together. They're going to cook all together. So you don't have so much to put away at the end of your recipe. And add them all in together. Give it another really good stir. And again, let's try to keep, especially the carrots, down low, because they're going to take the longest to soften and cook. Already looking like beef stew, isn't it? There you go. Very last major item is going to be your diced tomatoes. And I buy steam peeled diced tomatoes. And as I said, this is way too large a jar for that. So what I will do is I'll take half of this and I'll freeze it to go in sauce. So take about a half of the can. Stir that around. Oh, starting to really smell good because the meat was cooked in this kitchen. And believe me, that was tempting, but I didn't. Instead, I took a quarter of that half a cup of wine and I shared it with the pan because that's who I am. And there you go. So there's all of that we talked about. Also, a good trick I forgot to mention to you. Make sure when you put your chopping board out, wet a paper towel, put it down on your surface, put it on here. You're going to get very little slippage while you're trying to chop everything. And it protects your hands, protects those fingers. You don't want to be losing the fingers. So here is about where I would like to put half of my chosen barbecue sauce in. And then I will put the other half in when it's about halfway cooked. Okay, keep your area nice and clean, your hands nice and clean. And at this point I would also add a little bit of cornstarch, not a lot. Get a little bit in there. And if your liquid is still too thin halfway through, mix a couple tablespoons of cornstarch and warm water in a little cup. Don't just pour it in to very hot beef stew. You're going to get big gummy clumps. You want to stir it down in a cup of lukewarm water and then pour it in over, and you'll get a little more thickness in your beef stew. So everything is mixed in. Our carrots are pushed down to the bottom of the bath. Everybody's in the pool. And we're ready to put this in the slow cooker. If you want to follow me over a little bit here, I'll see if you can, I don't know if you can see me, but we're going to get this in the slow cooker. And everybody's slow cooker is a little different. Mine, I've got high, low, and keep warm. So I'm going to go on high, and I'm going to go for 4.5 hours. That's nice and slow. Everything is going to taste wonderful. I will stir probably twice within that 4.5 hours, and I'll probably add some more of the barbecue sauce in there as well. You can also, what I like to do is I'll take a jar of Heinz or whatever brand you use of the savory beef gravy or au jus gravy in the glass jar. Regular size jar about here. I would distribute that through another layer of flavor. And if you like it good and thick and you don't like it soupy, that will help thicken it up as well without watering everything down and keep your flavor. So I will see you again in about 4.5 hours to give it a taste. And I wish you could smell it because the house usually smells fantastic once this has been cooking a few. But I'll give it a taste in front of you, and we'll go from there. I hope you've enjoyed this. Don't forget, give me a thumbs up and check out the email address so you can get a grocery list and full instructions for this wonderful winter recipe. See you later. Hi everybody, we're back, and it's 4.5 hours later. And my God, I wish you could smell how beautiful my house smells. We're going to have a real quick taste because it's late. And this is what's going to be for dinner tomorrow night. Can you get in here and see this? Oh my gosh. I'll grab a little bit more light for you maybe. Oh, it is so good and it smells beautiful. Look at all that. Beautiful, nice, thick base gravy this made. Everything is cooked so tender. And I swear, this meat melts in your mouth. Oh my God. Yeah, you've got to try this recipe. Carrots are so tender. Potatoes just break so nicely in half. please try this recipe. If you can't do it right away, at least get the recipe from my email address. Give me a thumbs up if you like it. And please, I look forward to hearing your suggestions of what else you might like to see. This size crock will feed a good 5-6 people if you wanted to have company or family over for dinner. It also freezes really well. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and you'll try my comfy beef stew. Good night, everybody.